The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome to the Fandotech Friday 15, Mission Technical Reconnaissance. If you have any questions during the presentation, type them into your question window. This week, our presenter, Mike Archick, is explaining the benefits of virtualization. Take it away, Mike.
Hi, good morning and almost good afternoon, considering it's almost noon. I just want to step you through some of the benefits of virtualization. It's one of the specializations we have here at Fandotech, from both desktop workloads as well as server virtual workloads. Take your old traditional server configuration. You had physical hardware, and it was a single image per machine. So if you had a Windows 2003 host or 2008 host, it was only running that application or that server operating system, and with it you had tightly coupled software to the hardware. So if you had like multiple pieces of software running on that one piece of hardware, different conflicts can arise. So you're not really segregating out what your application workloads are because, well, you paid the money to get that individual server built, purchased, and you're going to jam as much as you can into it. So really what it ends up being is you might get as many applications on there as possible, but one of the main things is your server is never going to actually be able to be fully utilized. You know, your utilization is going to really kind of become more of a peak whenever you're doing your system backups or doing some sort of data processing on there to pull data on and off. And really what that ends up being is you end up having an inflexible and costly infrastructure because you'll have every host will be a siloed application. So one of the other big things, painstaking hardware upgrades and replacements. If you need to replace that hardware, you actually have to reinstall the applications. You have to install the operating system. You've got to move your data in and out of that virtual or that physical piece of hardware and actually get it onto another machine.
Excuse me, Mike. We've got a question here.
Sure.
For Linux web servers and database servers, which VM software is appropriate? VMware or Xen, or just simple VPS?
So it really does depend because, a lot of the market hypervisors out there now, you've got your VMware, your Xen, and you've got, Hyper-V out there from Microsoft. Linux web servers, databases, depending on what types of databases, they're enterprise databases, like your Oracles or your Windows SQL infrastructures. You really have to do some decent capacity planning to know what type of hardware you need based on those software requirements. But both VMware and Xen definitely suffice that. If you're talking about a virtual private server, if it's something that doesn't need internal access, for example, or if you're going to do tunneled access to and from your internal data center to a private data center, a VPS would work out just fine. But I always throw out the precaution of making sure that there's a decent amount of capacity planning, knowing how much hardware resource you need for that actual virtualized application set to exist on that virtual machine. To continue, you're before virtualization. This is, you still got a lot of companies out there, small, medium, large companies that still have this traditional approach. Physical piece of hardware, single OS, and running multiple applications, and ultimately a very underutilized system. Now you go after virtualization. So if you kind of see from the side here, you still have your physical piece of hardware. It's an x86 platform. Nowadays you're getting 8, 12, 24 cores on a physical machine. You've got CPU, your same memory, network interfaces, and disk resources in the back. But in a virtualized infrastructure, you're dumping in all of your virtual machines are individual, and they're running on the virtual machine layer. And in this case, this depicts a VMware virtualization layer. This can easily be Xen virtualization or Hyper-V virtualization. Really what ends up being is each one of those virtual machines is a container that's running inside that virtual infrastructure. So really the great thing is your compatibility is based on what is your underlying architecture. So your underlying architecture is pretty much going to be your x86, x86 64 platform. So a lot of your workloads that you run today, your Windows, your Linux. In some cases, there are some compatibilities built in for Solaris x86, et cetera, et cetera. There's some stuff out there for doing Mac virtualization. Those are few and far between. But your major vendors are definitely going to support your Windows and your Linux frameworks. And really what that ends up becoming is you create isolation over each one of those virtual machines. So instead of all your application sets being pushed onto one physical piece of hardware, each virtual machine runs a specific application or a tightly coupled application set. So if you had a 3-tiered application, you might have separate virtual machines, but you end up having the ability to run that on one physical piece of hardware. You're utilizing all those resources to the utmost capability. Other great piece is encapsulation. The fact is, your virtual machine is a bunch of files. It's no longer attached to a disk or a network card or a specific processor. It's a configuration file and it's portable. So it's configuration files, a disk image, which is just a big giant file depending on how big your operating system is that's loaded and what application sets are on there. It could range from some small number of gigabytes to a terabyte in size depending on what your platform is. Great thing about that, huge amount of ability to now do things like DR, disaster recovery, business continuity, because you're moving files around. You're not moving systems and applications around. And the other great thing, hardware independence. I can be on, and I'm just going to use names, I'm going to be on an IBM piece of hardware today, and maybe 4 years from now or 3 years from now when we go through a hardware refresh, I'm going to move and okay, HP has a better deal than my IBM vendor. And 3 years later, maybe my Dell vendor has a better deal than what HP could give me. So you're allowed to move your machines from hardware to hardware. It doesn't really matter. Great thing about that, and it's one of those things I'll kind of dig into a little later in the presentation, is you're no longer tied to the hardware for your application. Your application is now dependent upon the life of your OS. So take for the example of the Windows 2003. Windows 2003 came out late 2002, and it's still in production now. You could technically get a virtual machine running for 10 years that has absolutely no change, but it's moving around from hardware to hardware on the back end. Whereas before, you might have a 2003 server that was running in 2002. You probably had to replace that piece of hardware in 2005, 2006, just because of age, support, et cetera, et cetera. So that's really a huge benefit where you get into where hardware independence kind of comes into play. So I kind of go through some of those benefits, and like I said, I've been kind of moving forward a little bit in kind of some of those benefits, but I want to kind of dig into them a little more deeper here. So benefits of virtualization, making better use of existing infrastructure. So the fact is, if in your traditional approach where you have a single host running a single operating system, running some number of applications, you're still going to underutilize that system. You're going to get anywhere from maybe 10 to 15% utilization on that box, and you might peak your utilization during backup processes. It's like, well, kind of a no-brainer there. That why spend the money to make your backups faster? The big thing with virtualization is you're going to consolidate those down and actually use your existing hardware. And hardware isn't cheap, so the more you can get into a specific piece of hardware, the better. Save time managing infrastructure. Take for the example of you have some HP servers, some Dell servers. They're running different operating systems. There's different way to manage how those things are configured, how they, what kind of hardware it's on, swapping disks, and capabilities on the back end there. From the management of the infrastructure, it's one pane of glass. Dependent upon which hypervisor you select, or what platform you're going on. The idea is you're creating each one of these virtual machines as an entity that's managed within a greater object. So you're not managing each server independently. You're managing an infrastructure as a whole. Improve application availability. The point being that the fact that you have these virtual machines that can run on different hosts that can run those virtual workloads, and the fact is that those virtual machines are encapsulated. So they're a file. It's a configuration file. It's an that becomes an application set. You can take those and move those from hardware to hardware. So in the case of a piece of hardware goes down, you're in a clustered environment. Okay, that piece of hardware died, and I have a configuration that allows my virtual machines to start up on another available piece of hardware. Something you wouldn't have been able to do, back 2-3 years ago when you're thinking about does everybody have the expertise and money and time to build clustered solutions or load balance solutions for everything? You know, I always use the joke that I can have a virtual machine that's running Windows 3.1 and it's highly available, something you could never do in 1995. You know, but the fact is you can run those workloads as virtual machines, and now you've made those highly available. I'm not suggesting that that'd be something you do, but the idea is your lower end applications, no matter how small or how big, are all protected by that environment, by virtualization. And the other big thing is better protection of business data. You don't have to have those different entry points for all those applications or all those physical machines. You're able to put those in, lock them down as virtual machines. So because they're encapsulated, there's better ways to segregate who has access and who does not have access, because it's a virtual infrastructure layer. So your virtual infrastructure becomes a deeper piece of your data center. And I'm just going to expand this one out just so you actually see it right up front. Kind of where I was going before with being able to jam as many machines as you can. And it's really based on a consolidation, but you also have to take into consideration what your capacity planning is to know what you can get out of a specific piece of hardware. So in this example, it was like 10 physical servers. Each one of those physical servers was utilizing about 5 to 15%. So your annual support costs, like maintenance and patching, all that type of stuff runs into those support costs. And then you have power and cooling. Each one of these machines could easily be a 1U box that's 1 power supply, 2 power supply, or maybe it's a bigger box that was running some enterprise class boxes or enterprise class applications. Now you're moving that forward, 10 servers into 3. Your utilization of those 3 hosts goes from 60 to 80%. So you're taking all those 5 to 15% utilizers, pushing them and consolidating those down into lesser, bigger machines, but running at a higher utilization. So you're getting more bang for your buck. If you spend X amount of dollars out of it, why am I only going to use 5% or 15% out of it when I can get 80%, and that extra 20% is for something that is a peak or something that you need to account for some new added business option that you put out there. Support costs drop because now you're not managing 10 individual servers. You're managing one infrastructure. That one infrastructure, as much as it's 3 hosts, or say for example 5 or 6 or 15, they're all managed in the exact same manner. So your support costs go way down because you're managing it at a layer lower than you're managing those individual pieces of hardware. Annual power and cooling costs, they go down significantly because you're not spending the time for rack space, for cooling, and for keeping those hosts powered up. These are newer boxes, bigger boxes. They can sustain. They have more capability, and you're putting in all these smaller utilized machines into one bigger infrastructure. So really, server consolidation is really kind of where this game plays in. And you're eliminating server sprawl. It's always a big term when you're cleaning out an old data center and virtualizing. You're deploying those systems as virtual machines, and ultimately the great thing about it is with proper planning and licensing of those virtual machines, you have the ability to move those machines from server 1 to 2 to 3, depending on your utilization, or even for the ability to increase or add your high availability. Saving time managing infrastructure. Before virtualization, the whole plan, the idea is you're managing each host individually. After virtualization, you're dropping that down significantly. The source for this is IDC and VMware. The previous slide, pretty much the same setup as well. These are all things coming from industry standards, so it's not something that Fandotech is coming up with. The great thing about it is virtualization is not a small thing in the IT business anymore. There's a lot of great resources out there to do this research and come up with some great plans. So really, do more work with the same number of people, or do more work with the same number of people. So the idea is, sure, I might have had 10 servers before. Now I'm managing 3, 4, however many you need for that virtual infrastructure. But you're managing more with, the idea is, unfortunately in IT, you're managing more with less. And you're able to consolidate those things down, and they become one platform across the board. Drives productivity, zero downtime maintenance. Think of a sense of I need to update a piece of hardware or a drive failed. Okay, I got to move my virtual workload to another host that's available that can run my workload. I can take that server down, that hypervisor on the back end down. I can do the work I need to be done. I bring it back up. I'm ready to go. I move machines back on. Same thing for updates of that back end hardware. You know, unfortunately, from the virtual machine standpoint, those virtual machines are Windows or Linux, whichever. You're still going to do your Windows patching. You're still going to do your Linux patching. But the great thing about it is as much as you know, you don't have to worry about the individual hardware underneath. That's actually being managed by the by the back end. Built-in high availability, dynamic patching, definitely of the back end hypervisors. Common platform. One of those great things about it is I bring up any one of those virtual machines, whether if it's Linux, Windows, like I said, if it supports Mac, it's all the exact same platform. It's not, okay, well, this one needs a P3 class, and this is a 64-bit processor with X number of gigs. You know, it's all the exact same platform. So you're always going to get a pass-through of your processor from your hypervisor upward, on through and upward. Your disk is going to look like a very generic disk. So the great thing about it, you don't have to worry about these incompatibilities of older operating systems with newer hardware. You're always going to have that same ubiquitous virtual hardware across the board. Instant provisioning, a lot of your hypervisors have the ability to do template-based deployment. So you have a plain Jane, clean, ready-to-go Windows platform, right-click, deploy, you've got a new one out there. You don't have to step through a driver install or anything like that. It's instant on demand. Automated disaster recovery. Automated can easily be scripted or real actual workflows for that automation. But a lot of the hypervisor companies out there today are actually building this in as an addition and capability to be able to do this out of the box. Additional benefits: server consolidation, containment, server sprawl. You know, the increased utilization from 5 to 15 to 60 to 80. So it's really a rehash from the previous slide. Just kind of want to drive that home. Business response. Being able to do your routine IT tasks. You're becoming more responsive to your business needs. Being able to bring a new application to market isn't adding new hardware, isn't coming up with a plan for you know, what CPU amounts or what amount of RAM. You have the ability. You have an infrastructure in the back end that it's literally right-click, deploy, install application. Testing and optimization. Because it's one platform, you're reusing and repurposing right down the line. You can easily bring in some of those old pieces of hardware that were being used for those physical machines. You're bringing those in. That can be your new test equipment. You can actually bring those in and have those become your you know, additional resources to your virtual environment. Business continuity. The whole big thing being, like, if you have your disaster recovery built on top of your virtualized platform, everything's a file. It hits upon that whole fact of you're encapsulating your applications, your operating system into a bunch of files, disk files, configuration files. You're moving them from place to place. So you're going to minimize that amount of downtime because in the back end, you're going to replicate this data, and you have the ability to bring that up. And the great thing about it, common hardware, you bring it up on the other site, it looks just like it did whenever it was on the primary site, and you're good to go. Very simplified compared to having physical back ends and in doing this. I talk very quick, but I want to thank you for attending the benefits of virtualization. I want to give it back to the MC, and he'll take it from there.
All right, and indeed, thank you to all of today's participants. If we didn't answer all of your questions, although I think we did, we'll circle back with you independently. This webinar will be available for viewing on our blog at blog.fandotech.com, on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Fandotech, and on SlideShare at slideshare.net/Fandotech. Join us next week for another Fandotech Friday 15 Tech Recon, where we'll be discussing the benefits of managed firewalls. Register today by visiting blog.fandotech.com and clicking on the Friday 15 logo. This has been a production of Fandotech.